Andrey here at PDFTron. Today I'm going to talk to you about content accessibility for all screen sizes. When it comes to accessibility, a lot of you probably will think that accessibility kind of starts and stops within the PDF document itself or the way we create it. In this particular talk, what I want to kind of stress on is that the accessibility should encompass all the different elements. It could be the document itself, as well as all the UI surrounding when we're presenting the document itself. We want to ensure that we provide an accessible environment for everybody to complete their tasks. So to start things off, let's talk about creating accessible PDFs. Because there's a number of different ways to create PDFs on all the different programs and platforms, unfortunately there's not really a way to enforce that the PDFs that are going to be hitting your application are going to be accessible. There are two standards that kind of aim to somewhat standardize the accessibility requirement. One of them is Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, and the most recent version is 2.1. And there's also PDF UA, and it's originally been published in 2012 and revised in 2014. We're going to go through some of the kind of highlights from those two formats, and I'm just going to highlight some of the kind of commonalities between those two standards. So when it comes to accessibility, who is it really aimed? Like, who are the users? And it's the users with the cognitive or learning disabilities, users with low vision, or users with disabilities on the mobile devices. So really, those two previous WCAG and PDF UA that will make the experience better for this target audience. Okay, so let's go through a bit of an accessibility checklist. So when it comes to kind of creating an accessible document, we really want to ensure that we provide alternative text for images. So when the screen reader hits an image element within a PDF, that there should be alternative kind of explanation what the image depicts. So the users that might have vision impairment could understand the context of the image that they're looking at and connect the dots on the content itself. We'll also want to provide and define structural headings, lists, and data tables. We want to provide a document language and document title. So this way, when we're traversing a number of different documents, the screen readers can kind of pick up what language of the document we're talking about here, so that they can select the proper engine, a proper library to read it. Now, some of those actually, like alternative text for images and providing document language and document title, this is coming from the web world as well. So the same thing that we're thinking about kind of when it comes to documents and accessible PDF generation is actually borrowed from web content accessibility guidelines as well. We also want to ensure that we provide searchability for the documents. Now, when it comes to that, we want to ensure that there's a text area present that can be interacted with. And a lot of the times when the users kind of scan in an image or scan in their document, it's just an image, so it's not very accessible for the user. So if somebody tried to open a OCR image, well, they can't really, there's no text extraction that can happen. So really want to make sure that what we do in this case is that we run it through an OCR process and then we extract the text. Now, all the different OCR engines out there are made different. Some might actually provide you better results. And something that we notice that sometimes the way the text extraction kind of follows is it will provide you with a logical order of the text embedded inside of the document. So the logical order, the way, for example, that particular OCR engine provided us with an output might be different from the way the user would read or interact with the document. So there's no kind of structural, any structure to the document. So most often that content is going to be presented in a weird way that, again, even though we OCR the document and now are providing the searchability on it, well, when the screen reader kind of goes through it, it might not be the exact way that the author or the content creator of this particular document intended the document to be read in a certain way. And when it comes also to the font extraction, we want to make sure that it can be converted to plain text and again just passed into the screen readers. And we want to label the form fields in descriptive form validation or error messages. So when the user kind of navigates and tabs between the different form fields, we want to make sure that we provide an accompanying label that explains what this form field is for. And again, this is also coming from the web world. Whenever we have kind of like a label and an input, and if the label is not associated together with an input, the screen readers are just going to read the label and then they're going to jump to the next text input. And based on the positioning, it's very hard for the user to understand if that particular label was in fact corresponded with an input. So really, by having the proper label on every input and providing and using that property on the input field, we want to ensure that we provide descriptive information. And same thing goes for validation. Let's say I went in and I clicked into the field itself, and let's say I entered letters in a date field. It should provide me a descriptive message in order how would I go about resolving, or how did I fail validation, or maybe we'll have a cutoff at a certain age group, where we do some kind of test validation. You must be older than a certain age. Then that's where, again, we really need to ensure that we provide descriptive validation or error messages when filling out different content. And when it comes to navigation, there's a number of different ways to navigate the document. Kind of most common would be navigating the document through the table of contents. And it's very important to ensure that, especially when we generating or even going back to the OCR example where we scanned in a document, that document is not going to have any table structure. So there's not really a good way to understand how to navigate that particular document, what are the contents inside of the documents, and what are the different chapters. When it comes to kind of document manipulation or editing of the document, let's say we're merging two documents together, we're removing a certain page, it's also important to account for those use cases in your application, just to make sure that when we remove the page, all of a sudden now our table of contents is possibly missing that particular destination, or even our destination is kind of missing or misaligned with the number of pages now that are present in the document. If previously our go-to action was linked to a particular page and now that page is shifted, we want to ensure that it still can be traversable. Another great way to provide a user navigation is to save their spot in the document where they were at. So kind of almost like bookmarking, that is different from the table of contents, that I want to save my position within the document. And we also want to provide links inside of it. So on the page itself, we can provide links. And again, we need to provide descriptors of that particular link. If I click that link, where is it going to take me? Is it going to be an external URL, or is it going to be another page number? So really kind of explaining that. And the security of the document, it should not be in competition with or does not interfere with the accessibility. And for example, let's think of it in a publisher use case where we produce some kind of material and we want users to prevent just simply copying and pasting the text. There are flags on the document, on the PDF, which we can enable to prevent copy or prevent text selection or prevent printing of the document, but we want to ensure that those particular flags do not interfere with the screen reader, that the screen reader is one of the applications that authorized to actually grab the text, where we would just disable copy and paste via usual shortcuts. One of the other things that I wanted to touch on briefly that come up when talking about accessibility is that we really don't want to have any reliance on sensory characteristics alone to convey the meaning. And what I mean by that is that, for us, for example, red means stop and green means go. However, somebody who is colorblind might not necessarily extract the same meaning. So we really want to make sure that we're very expressive in terms of providing descriptions that go alongside that indeed that particular red is stop and green means go. We want to ensure that when we're using different color combination, they provide enough contrast so we can see on the document itself. And we want to actually use the text instead of the images of text, again for the various for the same reasons as providing the searchability on a scanned PDF, which is in turn image. We want to make sure that the text can be extracted and selected. We don't want to have any flashing or any blinking, and there shouldn't be any focus changes on the document without user initiation. So when I'm having fields on a form, I would assume a particular that I should be jumping around in the document, and I should just be going from one field to another, one after another. So when it comes to web content accessibility guidelines, there's three different conformance levels. There's A, AA, and AAA. And based on kind of the level of conformance that we have to meet, again, certain governments, certain jurisdictions, especially when dealing with public, have to adhere to certain level of conformance level according to the web content accessibility guidelines. Want to make sure that we implement that, or at least kind of take care of some of the things when it comes to accessible environments. So let's talk about pointer cancellation. So pointer cancellation can be explained where, let's say we'll have a PDF form, and inside of a PDF form, we have a checkbox that I could click on. So as the user navigating, let's say via keyboard or via mouse, and all of a sudden they get to the next field, just by tabbing to the field over or by selecting it with the mouse, we want to make sure that if I didn't release my mouse and I'm still holding it, that I can just move my mouse away, and that mouse down action would not actually trigger the effect of checking the checkbox, but instead it would be on the mouse up. That's when it would apply the checkbox. So if I just clicked on mouse down, I moved my mouse away, release mouse up somewhere else, and it didn't click the checkbox. So we want to make sure that we have the pointer cancellation. We also want to make sure that we have all the labels in the name. And one of the other things that we haven't touched on is when it comes to timeouts. Ideally, we want to have no timeouts at all. And what we mean by timeouts is ensuring that the user has as much time as they need to complete a certain task. Or if we do need a certain time sensitivity on a particular form field, then we want to ensure that that timeout is clearly stated at the beginning of operation, and the user is notified that they have a certain amount of time remaining. For the timeouts as well, we want to ensure that the user is going to be notified if there's going to be any data loss if they don't complete the task within a certain time limit. So when it comes to mobile and tablet experience, it's a whole new game. And what I mean by that is originally PDFs are really meant to be viewed on desktop environments where we have access to the big monitors. However, as the screen size getting smaller, like on mobile or tablets, I have to do a lot of pinching and zooming and moving around the page. So as you can see that it's even harder for an average user, and if we're kind of put an accessibility lens on it, it becomes much more difficult to complete simple tasks like navigating the document, viewing the document, and actually just trying to read the text on it. If we just simply go ahead and say, let's go ahead and resize the font on mobile to the next size up, there could be some run-ins of the text because it doesn't reflow around that particular, it just increases the font size in place. So the character might be running into each other on the screen, or potentially running off the screen or colliding with any other content that we might have. And one of the topics that I mentioned at the beginning of this is that we should not only focus on accessibility when it comes to our documents, but we also want to ensure that we create an app that also follows the same principles and guidelines as our documents. And again, we can just go ahead and rely on web content accessibility guidelines to tell us exactly that we shouldn't be using color to convey meaning. We should have enough contrast between the background and the text that we're placing it on. It should be navigatable by the keyboard. And at PDFTron, we actually put together a 5-step accessibility checklist for every single web app. And really, there's a couple of questions here. So again, as I mentioned, can your application be navigatable by keyboard? Are the icons intuitive enough and descriptive with tooltips? So not only the icon itself should be, you look at it and you understand what it means, but as I'm navigating it and I'm focusing on that particular button, we want to give it a meaningful label or a tooltip to understand what the tool does. And whether or not we're using native elements like paragraph, button, or instead of just using div for everything. And do buttons have a descriptive label to explain the action, what will happen if I press that particular button? And does the color scheme provide enough contrast? So if you're kind of thinking with accessibility first, not only when it comes to documents, but as well as the application that you're running it or displaying your documents inside of, I think you're going to be pretty well off in meeting the accessibility guidelines, as well as there's a number of different tools out there online that you can kind of test with to ensure that your documents or your application or documents and applications together pass certain accessibility levels. For the next section, what I want to do is show off some of the best practices and some of the features and functionalities that I mentioned in my presentation around accessibility and something that we do in PDFTron's web year. So first things first, let's start off with a reading order extraction or text extraction from a document that can enable us to play the screen reader. So here we use PDFTron's API to extract the text of a PDF document the way it appears to the user, and then reading it back to them in their specific voice. So this is publicly accessible demo, so you can check it out for yourself by navigating to pdftron.com and checking out our samples. So I'll go ahead and hit play.
Choose Big Cats by Tammy Gann Consulting, Christina Simmons, San Diego, Zoo Global, San Diego, California, end of page 1.
So as you can see here that it starts off reading with the document title and the header, gives a page number, and then kind of reads the text the way it appears on the screen. Again, with the other viewers out there, the text extraction algorithm might provide logical order extraction, thus messing up the order of the text being extracted out of the document and really providing an inaccessible experience for the screen readers. Another thing that I wanted to kind of get back to was around kind of mobile or tablet experience. So here we have the web viewer running in a desktop mode, and we have lots of screen size and room available. However, if I'm a mobile device, I actually want to go ahead and be able to, change the font size and be able to read it at any scale. So all I got to do here is just go ahead and flip over to the reader mode. And once in the reader mode, it preserves all the font information as well as the text. And we can still search the document and we can still perform highlights, comments, and annotations just like we would on a document if it was as a regular PDF. So what you see in front of you here, we extract all the text, all the information, all the text styles directly client-side in the web viewer without needing any server-side dependencies and putting out on the screen. And now we can have the ability to increase the font size and make the document experience much more accessible. Thank you so much for attending the presentation at PDF Association. Thanks to PDF Association for hosting this great event. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Andrey, thanks very much for that. Let's see if we can get we have time for some questions here. Okay. So what, moment. So what are Andrey, what are some of the policies or laws that govern accessibility in the United States?
Yeah, thanks so much. That's a great question. So one of the laws that governs accessibility standards, kind of across documents, across web, is Section 508 in the United States, where a lot of applications that serve public, especially governments or medical, they have to comply with accessibility. Now, Section 508 ensures that it follows the web content accessibility guidelines pretty closely and provides their kind of recommendation and enforcement of those policies, but also add some detail and color around stuff that is missing from web accessibility guidelines. For example, one of them being is CAPTCHA. So I'm sure you all came across where you had to select a certain amount of bridges or fire hydrants or school buses just to prove that you're a human being, to prevent kind of DDoS or bots just spamming your website. So as such, for the CAPTCHA, Section 508, for example, ensures that, there's going to be other alternatives ways to prove that you're a human, maybe through an audio and a microphone interaction, or maybe some other way where it reads out the characters to you and then kind of provides that information. So do check out Section 508 if you are building your application and have to comply with it in the United States.
Thanks. Is the reader mode that you described, is it using tag order or content order to display text content in the modified view?
In the modified view, it would use the content order extraction. So the way the user would kind of see it and read it on the screen, that's the same way we go about extracting the content and then providing it back to the users